How you doing? This is UK Fish ID videos. Through these series of films, I'm going to show you how to identify various British fish, both from the sea and fresh water. We're going to go through what they eat, where they live, and how to identify them from similar species. If you'd like to learn more about identifying UK fish, then why not get my latest book? It's available online and in local bookshops. There's a link in the description if you're interested. This week we're looking at freshwater bream, the silver bream and the bronze bream, as well as some of the hybrids that those fish create. They can be an easily missed species. Let's get into it. So in this episode I'm looking at the common bream, silver bream and their hybrids and how to tell them all apart. I'll do my usual disclaimer, which is I feel very important. You can't positively ID any fish alone by its colour. Fish change colour so rapidly according to health, age, sexual dimorphism, stress and the environment that they live in. So you can only use colour as a guide in conjunction with other more accurate signs. That being said, one of the other names for bream is bronze bream, and obviously the other one's called a silver bream. So colour does play a part in here, but it's just something to bear in mind. So starting with common or bronze bream, it's both the same name for them. In terms of distribution, they're pretty widespread across Britain. They start to get a bit thin as you get to northern Scotland, but common bream are found all over the UK. In terms of habitat, they like large lakes, canals and slow-moving rivers. You're not likely to find them in faster-flowing rivers, or if they are in them, they're going to be in the deep pools where it's a bit slower. In terms of diet, both bream species are pretty similar. They're generally bottom dwelling and they tend to grub around on the bottom for invertebrates, so we can't really distinguish them by what they eat. Behaviour is also pretty similar. They both go around in shoals. The only thing that bronze bream, common bream tend to do separately is they'll hang around on the surface and bask more than silver bream, but generally they both act very similar also. We can, however, use size as an indicator, as silver bream as a maximum will get to about 2 pounds, although that's an absolute monster. Silver bream are normally a quarter of that, whereas common bream can get well over 10 pounds. I think the British record's something near 20. So if you're catching a bream that's well over 2 pounds, it's almost certainly a common bream or a hybrid. It's highly unlikely to be a silver bream. So in this case, size is a useful way to ID bream. If it's a big bream, it's probably a common bream. So what about more exact features? Well, bronze bream are laterally compressed with an almost disc-like shape to them. The anal fin is long and tapers towards the end. When young, it starts off quite silvery and it lacks any colour to the fins, and as it ages, it changes to a brown or bronze colour once they get to a couple of pounds. So this is where you're going to likely mix them up with silver bream when they're small. A large bronze bream is by that nature, it's generally a muddy brown colour and it's big, whereas a silver bream is going to be small and more kind of silvery. So bigger ones are not so much an issue, the smaller ones are where you might get mixed up. So if we look at the silver bream now, what about its features? Well, the obvious one being is that it has very silver scales, and they're much brighter than a bronze bream. Even a small bronze bream, also known as a skimmer, they won't look as silvery as a silver bream, although this is only helpful in very clear water. It also has much bigger scales, meaning that the lateral line count is lower than a common bream. So if it's less than 50, it's almost certainly a silver bream, and if it's more than 50, it's almost certainly a common bream. So lateral line counts are actually really useful for IDing silver bream from common bream. The eye also takes up much more of the head in a silver bream. So if it's got a large eye, it's more likely to be a silver bream than a common bream. The fins on a silver bream are colourless, but the base has a red or pink tinge to them, which typically small common bream don't have. Another really key way of IDing these from common bream is that the mouth doesn't extend much, whereas with a common bream, the mouth will really pull out to help it hoover up food on the bottom. So if you've caught one of these fish and you just very gently pull the mouth, with a silver bream, it won't extend that much. But with a common bream, it will really extend out. So this is a really useful way if you've caught one and you want to kind of check it against other features that you might think. Silver bream also aren't that slimy to the touch, whereas common bream are notoriously snotty and slimy. There is a slight difference in distribution as well, as silver bream are only naturally found in eastern flowing rivers. However, they have been transported around the UK, so they do turn up in places, but they're nowhere near as common bream. So if you catch a bream, it's more likely to be a common bream, but doesn't mean it won't be a silver bream. Now, if you go and watch my rudd and roach video, I talk more about bream hybrids in that one, so I'm not going to repeat myself here, but if you want to check out rudd bream hybrids and roach bream hybrids, I would suggest that you check out that video. As a rule of thumb, those hybrids look closer to rudd and roach, so they're a little bit more easier to get confused with those than they are a bream. If you catch a rudd bream hybrid, it's fairly obvious that it's not a bream, and likewise a roach bream hybrid. If you want to check it out, go watch that video, you can find out more information about it. You do also get silver bream hybrids with both rudd and roach, and they can be a little bit trickier to ID. The real difficult hybrid is the silver bream and common bream hybrid, although these are incredibly difficult to tell apart. The problem with silver bream, common bream hybrids is they're going to have a very similar body shape, they're going to cross over in habitat and distribution. So they definitely occur, but I've never definitely seen one. They'd be a tricky one to ID. So to finish up on, what are the key identification traits between common bream and silver bream? Well, firstly, as I mentioned, the lips on a common bream protrude way more than a silver bream. So if you've caught a bream with a mouth that kind of comes out a lot more, it's going to be a common bream. The eye is huge on a silver bream and is equal or greater to the snout length, whereas on a common bream it's much smaller. The scales on a silver bream are much bigger than on the common bream, and it also has an amber tinge at the base of the fins and is obviously more silver than a common bream. If you catch a large bream, anything over 2 pounds, it's more than likely going to be a bronze or common bream. Don't forget, if you want to learn more about UK fish, do grab a copy of my book. There's a link in the description if you want to find out more. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing to the channel. It takes 2 seconds for you and it really helps the channel out. Go and have a look at some of the other UK Fish ID videos we've got on the channel, as well as the underwater and angling content on here. See you next time. Cheers. If you enjoyed this vid, why not check out this other video right here? If you can, please subscribe to the channel. It only takes a couple of seconds and it really helps me out. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.